The primary backdoor for Chinese goods into the North American market has been officially slammed shut. Mexico has recently taken the unprecedented step of imposing tariffs of up to 50% on a wide range of Chinese imports, including electric vehicles and steel. This sudden move is sending a massive shockwave through the global supply chain, and it signals a fundamental shift in how trade flows across the Western Hemisphere. For years, Mexico served as a vital bridge for Chinese capital to reach American consumers while bypassing high trade barriers. But this 50% tariff wall effectively destroys that bridge, forcing a massive decoupling that few saw coming so soon. The Mexican Secretariat of Economy recently confirmed the immediate activation of these measures across 463 specific product categories. This aggressive policy gained its final momentum following a landmark ruling by the United States Supreme Court, which strengthened the legal authority of the executive branch to use trade as a tool for national security. With this legal backing, Mexico is now moving in total alignment with Washington, effectively cutting off the flow of cheap Chinese industrial goods that have long flooded the region. Market analysts and international news agencies are already reporting a freeze on billions of dollars in planned investments from Chinese automakers like BYD and MG. This isn't just a minor trade dispute, but a strategic realignment that is forcing the world's second-largest economy out of the North American fortress. The impact is being felt immediately in the industrial heartlands of both nations, as the cost of doing business for Chinese firms in Mexico has doubled overnight. Why did Mexico, a country that has welcomed billions in Chinese investment for years, suddenly decide to turn its back on its most significant financial partner? To understand why Mexico made this dangerous gamble, we must look back at a secret strategy that was designed over 30 years ago. For decades, China viewed Mexico not just as a trading partner, but as a strategic gateway into the heart of the American economy. The foundation of this plan was built on the North American Free Trade Agreement, which allowed goods produced in Mexico to enter the United States with minimal or no tariffs. Chinese officials and state-linked companies saw a massive loophole in this system that they could exploit to their advantage. By establishing massive manufacturing hubs within Mexican borders, China could effectively bypass the heavy anti-dumping duties that Washington had placed on direct shipments from the mainland. This was the birth of the Trojan Horse strategy, where raw materials and components were shipped from Chinese ports to Mexican factories for final assembly. Once these products received the Made in Mexico label, they were moved north across the border under the protection of free trade rules. This clever backdoor strategy allowed Chinese steel, electronics, and auto parts to flood American stores while appearing to be local North American products. For years, the United States largely tolerated this arrangement as long as it kept consumer prices low and the regional supply chain functioning. And China poured billions of dollars into Mexican infrastructure and industrial zones, creating a deep economic dependency that seemed impossible to break. The city of Monterrey and other northern industrial hubs became the front line of this invisible expansion, as entire industrial parks were built exclusively for Chinese firms. This arrangement provided China with a permanent insurance policy against the growing trade hostility between Beijing and Washington. As long as Mexico remained a member of the North American trade bloc, China had a guaranteed path to the American consumer. This brilliant backdoor strategy worked for decades, and it allowed China to maintain its dominance even as tensions with the West began to rise. But today, Mexico is no longer willing to serve as China's shield, and the era of the Trojan Horse has come to an abrupt end. So where exactly did this decisive shift begin? The answer lies in a countdown that started ticking toward July 2026. This is the year of the mandatory review for the USMCA, the trade agreement that governs almost all commerce between Mexico, the United States, and Canada. As this deadline approached, Washington made it crystal clear that Mexico would no longer be allowed to sit on the fence. The United States government signaled that if Mexico continued to act as a funnel for Chinese industrial overcapacity, its own access to the American market could be revoked. For Mexico, this was not just a diplomatic threat, but an existential crisis for its entire economy. At the same time, the domestic situation inside Mexico was reaching a boiling point. Low-cost Chinese steel and electronics were no longer just passing through to the north, but were flooding the local Mexican market as well. This influx began to crush Mexico's own manufacturing base, putting hundreds of thousands of local jobs at immediate risk. As a result, the Mexican government realized that by protecting Chinese interests, they were inadvertently destroying their own industrial future. This strategic calculation became painfully simple for the administration in Mexico City. They could either keep the Chinese investment and risk being cut off from the United States, or they could sacrifice the Chinese partnership to save the North American alliance. To choose China would mean economic isolation from its largest customer, while choosing the United States offered a chance to become the primary factory of the Western world. This pressure created the breaking point that forced Mexico to take a stand. It became clear that the survival of the nation depended on proving to Washington that Mexico was a fortress, not a backdoor. So, the government decided to strike first before the 2026 review could dismantle their trade privileges. Survival for Mexico meant making a choice that was no longer just a policy shift, but a total realignment of its national destiny. President Claudia Sheinbaum took this mandate to the global stage, formally declaring a strategy of North American economic fortification. This move signaled that Mexico was ready to end its years of silent cooperation with Beijing and integrate itself fully into the American economic orbit. Under this new policy, Mexico City launched Plan Mexico, a massive industrial initiative designed to replace Chinese imports with domestic production and regional supply chains. The goal was clear: to prove to Washington that Mexico could be the trusted manufacturing engine for the entire continent. However, this great divorce from the world's second-largest economy came with an immediate and heavy price. China did not stay silent as its strategic backdoor was being bolted shut from the inside. Beijing quickly launched trade investigations into Mexican exports and issued warnings of retaliatory measures that could destabilize key Mexican sectors. This tension felt in the halls of government soon spilled over into the industrial heartlands of northern Mexico. As Chinese automotive and electronic giants like BYD paused their massive factory plans, thousands of Mexican workers found themselves caught in the crossfire. In cities like Monterrey and Juarez, the sudden freeze on Chinese investment led to immediate layoffs and a sense of growing uncertainty on the factory floors. Consequently, local labor unions have begun to voice their frustration, as the promise of new high-tech jobs was replaced by the reality of idled production lines. The pain of this separation has been greater than expected, and the severance of these ties has created a massive rift in the global manufacturing map. But the relationship between Mexico and China has already shifted beyond the point of return, and the tremors of this divorce are being felt across every major industry. The most immediate and visible change is occurring in the electric vehicle sector, where the once established supply routes from China are being disconnected. The new 50% tariff on non-FTA imports has fundamentally altered the cost calculations for Chinese manufacturers who previously viewed Mexico as a strategic gateway to North America. To maintain their dominance under these new trade rules, North American leaders like Tesla are accelerating their efforts to fill the supply gap by localizing their entire production chain within the region. As a direct result of these efforts, there is a significant increase in local investment, with battery and component plants once located in Chinese industrial hubs now flowing into Mexican industrial zones. This restructuring of the global factory extends beyond high-tech electronics and into the heavy industry of steel production. The flow of low-cost metal from China, which long utilized Mexico as a transit point to bypass U.S. duties, is now facing a definitive blockade at the border. As a result, the market is turning toward North American steel suppliers to sustain the massive construction and manufacturing needs of the continent. The supply chains that once tied Mexico to China are being replaced by regional fortifications designed to withstand geopolitical pressure. Now, the industrial map has been redrawn, and for the first time in decades, the control over North American manufacturing is concentrating within its own borders. This shift represents the permanent construction of a new North American economic fortress, moving away from distant and uncertain suppliers toward a self-sustaining regional market. Now, the focus is on whether this new alignment will provide a lasting shield for the region, or if it marks the beginning of a deeper divide in the global economy. This fundamental shift has granted Mexico a unique and near-monopolistic position as the primary manufacturing hub for the entire North American market. By effectively restricting Chinese influence within its borders, Mexico has become the central corridor through which all regional trade must now flow. However, this exclusive status has also marked the beginning of a much more complex internal struggle for control over the rules of this new order. The industrial wall that Mexico built to block China has secured the regional supply chain, but it has also created a high-stakes arena where Washington and Mexico City must now debate the terms of their integration. With Chinese competition removed from the equation, the focus is shifting toward who will dictate the labor standards, environmental regulations, and profit margins of this unified economic bloc. The reward for Mexico's loyalty is immense, but it comes with a heavy dependence on a single partner that is more demanding than ever before. The strategic leverage that Mexico once gained by playing both sides has vanished, leaving them to navigate a future where their industrial destiny is tied exclusively to the policy shifts in Washington. Mexico chose survival by abandoning Beijing and entering the American fortress for protection. But a fortress that guards against an external enemy can also become a battlefield for those within its walls. Today, we are witnessing the birth of a new North American order that is as rigid as it is powerful. Whether this new alignment becomes a lasting victory for Mexico or a cage of their own making is a question that only time will answer. Mexico has found its place in the New World, but the real war for its independence may have only just begun.